They should definitely know how long the term of the note is. If they don't know how
Yes.
long the note term is, that's a red flag.
Yeah, that is some low hanging fruit. That if you ask that question and get I don't know, probably need to walk away from that deal. That's not a good sign. All right, welcome back to the Wealth Independence Podcast, where freedom leads and real wealth follows. I'm Dustin Bailey, and I'm here with Adam Penn. Hello, Adam.
Hi, Dustin.
How are you this fine day?
I'm doing well. The other day...
You can't talk about the weather. You can't talk
No, I'm
about
not
the
going to
weather.
talk about the weather. I was going to
Okay.
say that I was talking to someone who listens to our podcast. We were at like a lunch, and he was like, he made some joke. He was like, you need to banter more. And it wasn't about the podcast, but it was like in the moment because he hears you say that all the time at the beginning of the show.
That we need to banter more?
Well, he was like a joke. Like I was talking in front of a group or at a lunch or something, and he slid that in there, and I caught it. So
I got you. Well, what do you want to banter about?
I'm flying to the San Juans in like a week and a half. That should be fun.
San Juan?
Yeah,
Puerto Rico?
No, the San Juan Islands outside of Seattle. It's like the Orca Islands and over there, and it's off the coast of Seattle. There's a little Roche Harbor that we're flying into, and I'm going to stay at the little hotel, and then we're going to go the next day we'll fly into Boeing Field and stay in Seattle for a day, and then fly home.
Very nice. Are you doing the flying here on this one? Very nice. Oh, you're going to get to go to Boeing Field. That's exciting.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah. That's like a bucket list kind of thing people want to fly, or like pilots want to fly into. It's one of those.
Is it?
I think so. Yeah, because like it's a very historic place, right? Like that's where some of Boeing's like most historic jets made their first flights out of there.
I've said this a few times. I don't know if recently. I don't know if I said it to you, but a lot of people in aviation are like really geeked out by aviation. I'm like, I think it's cool, but it's not. I'm just in the plane to get to A to B faster. Yeah. I didn't get into aviation because I thought it was like this awesome thing. I mean, it's cool, but like, especially the small, slow planes and the acrobatic stuff. And like, I've got some buddies who have like specialty old aircrafts and like wood or like biplanes, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm kind of the same way. Like that sort of stuff I don't get too much into, but I appreciate like historical things, right? Like that's the only reason I have appreciation for Boeing Field. But anyway,
I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be a good trip.
20 minutes from downtown Seattle or 10 minutes or something. It's like close. You can Uber downtown really easy.
It's some busy airspace too, so that'll keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
Nice.
It'll be fun.
Well, good.
You don't have to get cleared into the Bravo if you just have like 7,500 on your squawk code. You'll be fine.
Yeah, that's the secret. Yes. Oh, geez. Well, speaking of squawk codes, we want to talk about real estate debt today in this No Investor Left Behind episode. I don't know. I guess you talk about indecipherable terms. Maybe there's definitely some of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a lot of folks, like if you've come from the residential real estate land, debt's fairly straightforward there. And I think for anyone that's maybe not done in investing, you're probably only familiar with conforming loans and the mortgage you have on your house. And maybe if you've done fix and flips, you're familiar with hard money loans. But once you step into like the commercial space, it's somewhat of a whole other world. A lot of different terms, a lot of different concepts and things that don't apply in the residential land that you'll never see anywhere else. So
I think it might be worth starting on terms, like not like terms as in like a dossier, but like the term of the loan, like how long is a loan good for, like length of loan. Because a lot of times you'll see, I think most maybe non-commercial investors or just non-investors in general see a 10-year loan and think that it's paid off at the end of 10 years, right? Or a 5-year loan, it's paid off in 5 years. You're doing a 5-year amortization, right? Because when you think of a 30-year loan or a 15-year loan on a regular residential home, it's paid off at the end of it, right? You don't owe anyone anything when you're done, assuming you've made all your payments. And in the commercial space, or even just in different types of financing, you could end up with a 5-year loan on a 30-year amortization, meaning that that loan would be paid down to zero over 30 years, but you only have the loan for 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, you owe whatever the current balance is in full. And that's very common in commercial. And I think new investors sometimes get scared by that, right? They're like, well, the loan's due in 5 years, what happens then? You refinance it, right? If it's a 1980s building, it's probably had 5-10 loans on it, right? Like it's not like a home that's just paid off.
Yep. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, the term is different. The fact that like the amortization and the term can be separate, that's a new thing to a lot of folks. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I think it's a pretty good place to start, because yes, they're in that example. I mean, that's very, very common, right? To see a 5-year note on a 20-year amortization or 30-year am maybe. And that if you're making monthly payments, right, that would be 5 years, so 60 payments. And on that 60th payment, you've been paying the amount as though you were going to pay the whole loan off in 20 or 30 years. And so that's what the monthly payment is based off of. But there's not 360 or 300, did I do the math right on that one?
240.
Whatever, months of payments, right? There's 60 months of payments. And whatever the loan balance is at month 60, it's due at month 60. And so this is why we've talked before about the real estate cycle and why debt plays into that. Because if you happen to have one of these loans that is coming due at a time where you're going to have to refinance, right? Because it's only 5 years and you've got this big balloon payment. And most commercial investors don't just sit around with the cash for that in their pocket, right? There's either going to have to be some sort of refinance, or you have to do a cash in refi, or potentially raise new equity from investors and pay that all off. And that has its whole own complications. So that's a very, very real thing. I think 5 years is probably a fairly standard time frame, and certainly for deals that we look at, that's pretty middle of the road. You can have debt that goes shorter. Typically, the shorter you go, the more it's looking like bridge debt.
We have debt on an apartment building that's 5-year. It's a 10-year loan, but the rate resets after 5 years, and there's no prepayment penalty after 5 years. So it's like you have 10 years of security that the debt's there, but you don't know what the rate's going to be in 5 years.
Yeah,
Could and that's another layer.
That's another layer on top of it, right? Where now you've got, not only can the rate, like it's not just floating rate debt, but you can now have these structures where the rate is fixed for a period of time and then goes floating, or potentially vice versa. Like it kind of becomes there's not as much regulation in commercial land as there is for like the standard residential conforming notes. So it's, in some ways, it can end up being the Wild West as far as like how these debt products end up structured. And there's some fairly standard things, and you get, especially for products like multifamily, and you've got Fannie and Freddie, they have some pretty standardized products, and you can know what to expect. But that's just because they've decided to standardize on something, not because there's necessarily law around it. And so you end up going to smaller, banks, but especially like non-bank lenders, and the terms on all of this stuff can vary wildly and can vary deal to deal. And go ahead.
I'll give an example. I think we should maybe just go through a few examples and then talk a little bit about rate versus floating, or fixed versus floating. But the one example that I can think of just internally is that, we do flips, and we have people who give us hard money loans, and those hard money loans from private people, right? So we're not dealing with an institution. We're dealing with Joe down the street. Yep. I'm dealing with Joe down the street. Will give us all sorts of different terms, right? Probably the most favorable one I've had is 7% interest only. So that means I'm only paying the interest. Let's just say it's $100,000 a year, or a $100,000 loan, and it's 7%. That means I owe $7,000 a year. We've had hard money lenders like that who are willing to give us $100,000 to maybe go do a project, or rehab a building, or flip it, whatever it may be. That they don't want the monthly cash flow, right? I don't know what that works out to, about $400 a month, $600 a month or so. They don't want that cash in their bank every month. It doesn't change their life. So, and it's better for me if I don't have to make the payment every month, because I can let the project kind of pay off the debt. We've done it in the past where we let that just accrue. So at the end of the loan payment, or the loan terms, call it 12 months, we owe the $100,000 initial note value and the $7,000 of interest. So you can get really unique on them, but those are some of the ways. One of the more unique deals I've seen.
Sure. Yeah, and you touch a little bit on interest only, right? And let's talk about that. That's another thing that doesn't typically exist in the residential space. But You can have, to go back, let's say we've got our 5-year loan. So it's, 60 payments, but it's on a 20-year amortization. So it's a lower payment, but the first 2 years of that, you only owe the interest. So now you're not paying down the actual principal. It's literally just the cost of the money. So to use this, we'll keep similar numbers here, even though this is kind of small for commercial land. But if it's Adam's example of $100,000 at 7%, regardless of what the amortization schedule is, you only owe that $7,000 a year, or that just whatever, I guess a hair over $600 a month in interest. Now the downside, of course, there's the upside is if you're doing, let's say, a project where there's a lot of heavy rehab, a lot of capital expenditures early on, you don't have to have as much cash going towards the debt payment. It can now be going towards actually adding value to the property. But at the same time, that principal balance, the original amount you took out, isn't going down. You're only servicing the debt or servicing the interest. And so you hit the end of year 2. It's now the 3rd year. You've got 3 years left in this note. Yes, you're 2 years in. I can do simple math.
You can do simple math.
Yeah, thank you. You've got 3 years left in the note, and it might be amortizing, but it's not starting as though it's not starting as though you were making those like principal payments back from year 1. Like you're starting now, and then you still have that big balloon payment on month 60. So there's pros and cons, and of course, for any someone sitting in our seat, if we're evaluating these sorts of debt structures for a deal, we have to make sure that, for one, that's you're not going to run into some sort of wall, and that's not going to create some kind of unsolvable problem in month 60. And so, a lot of times that can make sense if the plan is to rehab a property, let's say a apartment building, and so we're going to do some unit rehabs and fix the landscaping and all that stuff, and add value, like do things to push rent, increase the value of the property. And so it's okay to not be paying down that principal, because we know when we've added the value and we go to refinance that property, the value is going to be so much higher. So that's there's some business plan, some execution risk, but certainly as a passive investor, if you're ever investing in anything that has debt, you want to understand this and understand the terms of the loan, particularly if there's some sort of balloon payment, or if it's a shorter term, especially less than 5 years. The question would be, okay, well, what's the exit plan here? How do you plan to deal with the fact that this debt's maturing? You're going to refi? Is the value going to be higher? Will you be able to refi? We can kind of, this sort of now leads into a discussion about interest rates, which we talked about interest only, but now you have fixed rate debt, you have floating rate debt, potentially a product that has a combination of both. I don't know. I've talked for a bit. Adam, you want to say something on that?
I mean, I don't think we need to go super in depth into it, but I think keeping kind of with our same example, right? We have a loan that is 6.25% fixed. It was fixed in August of 25, and it resets in August of 30, I guess, 5 years later. And whatever the interest rate is, or I think it was, some metrics that they track, call it the 5-year Treasury, plus some spread that the bank makes. So 5-year Treasury plus 3% or whatever. So if the 5-year Treasury is at 9% in 2030, we got 3, my loan's going to go to 12%. At least I know what it's going to be, and I know I have it for another 5 years. But let's say the 5-year Treasury is down at 1%, and plus 3, it's going to put me at a 4% interest rate, and it's going to relock for another 5 years. So there's a lot of ways you can deal with it. Some of these have prepayment penalties, and I mean, think of it like a business plan or a contract. You can put whatever you want in there, right? Yep. It's just a loan, and there's some pre-agreed upon terms. So I think that's most of the high level numbers and metrics that people would look at. You've got your term, how long it is, your amortization schedule, if there's interest only, and the amortization schedule, just going back to that, is if you made the number of payments for however long that amortization schedule is, and the loan was that long, it would be paid off in full, right? Interest only, whether or not you're only paying interest and not amortizing at all, right? You're only paying the interest payments. The loan never gets worth less or gets a lower balance. And then you've got the rate, right? What's your rate at? And then any type of points, either that be origination or exit points or prepayment penalties or anything like that. There might be some 1 or 2 percentage points that are tacked on there. A lot of times you'll see 1% of the loan value for originating the loan. That's the bank getting paid for originating the loan.
Yep.
Items of that nature.
Absolutely. And going back on the rates, I think something you mentioned that you've got something where basically it doesn't become floating rate, but it resets every 5 years at a new, or it sort of locks for another 5 years at some new amount. Correct? Is that product? So you see, that's another interesting thing that I personally haven't seen a lot of, and I feel like more often than not, you would have 5 years of, say, fixed interest, and then it goes floating just straight from there on out, and that would typically be on a monthly basis. So using the same bench.
This might make me look stupid, but I honestly thought it was a 5-year loan until I went down to sign the doc. Actually, I'd signed the docs. We closed the building, and I was reading the note, and I was like, this is a 10-year note. Only has prepayment penalty for 5. I mean, that's really all that mattered was, right, after 5 years, I could refinance it with no penalty.
Yeah.
But we had a whole nother 5-year runway that I didn't really know. It was a small local bank. Honestly, they were kind of unique to deal with to begin with. Everything kind of changed at the last minute, but we had another 5 years on there. Whether or not the guy that got me the loan at the bank, he's not really a mortgage originator, but the personal banker there, the commercial banker I was dealing with, I don't even know if he knew that was in there. But,
you're the first person that actually read the loan docs.
Me and the guy that wrote them.
Yeah. So. But no, you said something else there too. You talk about an extension. I realized we didn't talk about that, right? So that's another thing that exists in commercial land, is you can see maybe a 3-year note or a 5-year note with the option to extend for 1 or 2 years. And that might be a free extension. It might also be, hey, you got to pay some percentage of the outstanding balance down in order to extend it. But that's another thing that personally I like to see, because it gives a little bit of flexibility, right? It's okay. So if we hit 5 years and the market's really, really down, it's going to be tough to refi. Well, that's fine. We will pause the refi and we'll just do an extension for another year and let things recover. So that sort of helps build out a timeline, because almost always the more time that you have before the loan matures, the better the situation. The other thing I wanted to hit was something else you said, Adam, was the prepayment penalties. And again, this ties into how long the loan is, because it's not necessarily always the best thing to have a very long-term, like, fixed loan, because now you introduce in commercial land prepayment penalties, which again is not something that exists much in residential. Your mortgage on your house, you can typically go pay off at any time, and you're not paying a penalty for paying that off. And that's not the case for a lot of commercial debt. And that's honestly, like prepayment penalties and defeasance and things like that, that's probably a whole separate episode. But I think the big takeaway is to if you're a passive investor going into a deal, to sort of understand how the term of the loan is matched to the business plan, and whether or not there's expected to be any kind of prepayment penalty. Because if so, that's just, if you got a 10-year note and the plan is to sell the property in 5 years, but there's a big prepayment penalty that hasn't burnt off yet, that's an out-of-pocket expense at the sale of the asset that just comes out of the final returns, and so it can actually reduce overall investor returns. So again, another question worth asking, and making sure that if you're investing in a deal, that a sponsor has thought about that and actually has a good answer and has a plan. But just know that there are prepayment penalties, and they, especially in the early days of a deal, they can be pretty steep. Like, these banks don't, if you're going to take out several $1 million from an institution, they typically, they want to make something on it, right? They don't want you just turning around and giving the money right back to them.
I think the sponsor should be able to explain it to you, and they should definitely know how long the term of the note is. If they don't know how long the note term is, that's a red flag.
Yeah, that is some low-hanging fruit that if you ask that question and get I don't know, probably need to walk away from that deal. That's not a good sign.
If this was beneficial, I think people should like, subscribe, follow on all the different things. I know on Spotify you can, actually, I don't even know what you can do on Spotify. I think you can leave a review.
No one knows what you do. I don't know anybody that listens to podcasts on Spotify.
I use Spotify. I just don't know how you do it. I think you got to
days,
go to the song. I think you have to like it.
Okay.
Maybe
one of these days we will figure out what you actually do on Spotify.
You can report it.
Yeah, it is very important. But no, if you've enjoyed this, certainly do all the things that let the computers know that you're enjoying this content. We'll get the message out to more people. But I don't know, Adam, any other closing thoughts?
No, sir. Not that I can think of.
This is a pretty high level view of debt. We could go, honestly, almost everything we talked about could be its own episode. Maybe we'll cover more in the future.
You can rate it. There's a rate button.
There's a rate button. Got it. Okay, so go rate on Spotify.
I hadn't done it yet.
Well, you should do that for our podcast. But if you if there's anything from this you'd like to hear more of, go to the website, wealthindependencepod.com. We got a contact form. Write in and let us know what you'd like to hear. We'll cover anything specific. We always like covering listener requests and things like that that come from the real world instead of just the crazy things floating around in mine and Adam's head. That's it's always good to be grounded in the real world. But we appreciate everybody listening. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Just remember, where freedom leads, real wealth follows. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for joining us on Wealth Independence. This show is for informational purposes only and is not financial, investment, legal, or tax advice and does not constitute an offer to buy or sell securities. All investments carry risk, and investors should always conduct thorough due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before investing. Until next time, remember, freedom leads and real wealth follows.